Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Right Time. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening on the ESPN app, Apple Podcast, wherever y'all do that. Thanks for joining us here. Give us those, 5 stars and reviews and stuff like that. We greatly appreciate it. And by we, I mean my bosses. This is our second episode of the week. We'd like to do an interview here. And this week with us, we've got the author of The Heritage, Black Athletes, A Divided America, and the Politics of Patriotism. You also know him as a columnist for ESPN, the magazine. Howard, Bryant, you do a lot of stuff, although I think, are you still the guy on the Sports Reporters with the big old earring?
Don't you love those pictures? I was like, that earring went out like 8 years ago, and Sports Reporters isn't even on the air, but so be it.
I'm just saying, I'm just making sure that everybody is able to place the person.
That is that guy. I am that dude, yes.
All right, now, the book, The Heritage, Black Athletes, A Divided America, and the Politics of Patriotism. I'll start with how you came about the decision to write the book.
Well, I think the first thing that happened was just watching what has happened to sports post 9/11. And watching the ramping up of the flags and the flyovers and the homecomings and the surprise inductions and all of that stuff, or the surprise homecomings and the inductions on the field, and then watching that morph into more and more marketing. Like, for example, we got Memorial Day coming up, and now, which is supposed to be a somber day where you mourn the people who have served the country and died for it, but yet you'll see sports teams wearing camo jerseys, camo hats, camo everything. And so you started to look at that and then combine it with Trayvon Martin and LeBron James and the Miami Heat wearing their hoodies. And then also what started happening in Ferguson, where all of a sudden you started seeing athletes speak out in a way that we hadn't seen athletes speak out since Ali. It'd been 40 years. And so when you start to see these two things combined, to me, what really struck me as interesting was the way that you could see politics and nationalism in the military and police become part of the everyday sporting experience, while at the same time telling the black athletes who were suddenly becoming more vocal to shut up and play. That collision made me say, you know what, there's something here worth talking about.
Well, I think in something you just said there, you just hit on a part of this that I always find to be fascinating, which is the amorphous notion of politics. So with the national anthem, for example, so much of America, I believe, views the national anthem as neutral to politics, as though it is not a political expression in and of itself. And so anything that goes against it is politics. Like, on one hand, not honoring it is politics, but the act of playing it is not politics. And I think one thing that I'd be interested to know about your exploration on this is just, what are we even really talking about politics? Or are we talking about stuff that makes people mad when you have the objection to the quote unquote politics?
Absolutely. What you're getting at here, and what we found, was the fact that when you're dealing with the American flag. I actually did a class on this not too long ago. I spoke at UMass a couple of weeks ago, and then did it again last week or the week before. I asked people if they thought the American flag was political. And the entire class, for the most part, all of them who raised their hand said no. They said, I said, well, what do you think it is? And they said, well, that's patriotism. And I said, well, what's the difference? And people do make a distinction between a flag which represents the political attitude, the cultural attitudes, the moral attitudes of the country, and actually being a Republican or Democrat, which is bizarre to me. However, it is something that is very clear, and it's something that you hear all the time. And then when you begin to add things that make people mad, that's where the distinction comes from, even though I don't see a distinction. But there's no question that when you talk to, I think ESPN a couple of years ago, before the 2016 election, did a focus group, and the focus group concluded that whenever images of protesting players, and Colin Kaepernick especially, whenever those images hit the screen, the rating went way down. But when there were pictures of soldiers, military, flag, everything else, the ratings went way up. And the response was, well, one is politics and one isn't. And that is the distinction that Americans make.
Well, there's also, I think, a complicating factor, especially when you talk about the NFL. Like, I've been reading a book I need to finish it called Brand NFL. I need to look up the author before we get done with this. But one thing they talk about is what's proven to be good for business is not being ahead of the social curve, but almost in some ways being behind it. And I mentioned that just simply to say that patriotism is not just a political notion in this discussion, but you can't ignore the fact that patriotism is business.
No question. And I think that is the biggest difference, and that is why I've been so disappointed, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to do the book, was I've been so disappointed with how we've been covering this for the past 5-6 years. You cannot have this conversation without discussing 9/11. 9/11 is the number one demarcating line of the lifetimes for a lot of people. I mean, for your generation, I got you by a few years, Bo. I mean, if you were born after 1987 or after 85 for the most part, 9/11 is the most important event of your life. When I was a kid, it was the Cold War. That's what we were afraid of. It was the Cold War. It was Vietnam. It was Watergate. Those were the things that defined the culture. Nothing has been more important in terms of how we sell sports, how we package sports, than 9/11. And if you're not going to discuss the two together, the collision of what sports looks like post 9/11 and suddenly this rise of political activism on the part of the players, then you're missing the entire story, because the sports industry didn't want anything to do with anything that appeared to be political or controversial. But 9/11 turned some of these issues that would have once been controversial into, well, who doesn't have a problem with terrorism? This is something that became part of the business model, and you would have never seen that. If you go back and look at sports during Vietnam, look at sports during even World War II for the most part, you did not get the sports teams to go into business with this the way they do today. Today, it is part of the business model.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, and you touched on it just a little bit, is one thing that's worth remembering, and it dawned on me a couple of years ago. I was just talking on Twitter with somebody. I forget, they were younger than me. I can't remember how old they were at the time. But they had no recollection of a sports world prior to 9/11, or at least no real familiarity with what sports was before 9/11. And it really has been a drastic change, although it didn't even really happen gradually, though, right? Like, it happened immediately after 9/11, and it made sense that you would have something to happen. You could understand how those things change immediately after 9/11. They just never changed again.
They never changed back. Absolutely. I mean, I ask people if they notice the product placement of the American flag in sports is something that, if you're of a certain generation, it's new to you. I was watching the Celtics game last night, and there's an American flag on the backboard of every NBA game, on both backboards. There's the flag is everywhere. It is the product placement. So of course, when you see that as it's part of the uniform now. If you look at the NFL, the referees have an American flag on their uniforms. The broadcasters and politicians alike both have, the American flag lapels on their suits. And so obviously when you take that and then you have a Colin Kaepernick kneeling, all of a sudden this place, sports, that was supposed to be where everybody put their problems away, and you were a Cowboys fan, I'm a Packers fan, or whatever. Now all of a sudden the politics are embedded into the sport as well.
9/11 is kind of to the point that we get to, but of course your book leads into that, and the figures that you really singled out are like Paul Robeson, Muhammad Ali, and Jackie Robinson. I feel like Paul Robeson is one of these guys where I think people know the name but don't really know the story and like the majesty of that one man.
No, not at all. And because it goes back, I think what's funny about this is that I try really hard not to be tough on people, because if you don't study this stuff, that was 100 years ago. It doesn't feel like it. I mean, Paul Robeson died in 1976, but he was a player. He played in the NFL in 1922. So you're going back almost a century, but Robeson was one of the guys, obviously back then in the 1940s, with the collision or the clash with Congress over communism and everything else. Here was a guy who put everything on the line for what he believed and ended up, being denounced by Jackie Robinson in 1949. And lost everything. We talk about Colin Kaepernick losing everything, but Colin Kaepernick didn't lose nearly as much as Robeson, because Colin Kaepernick still had money in the bank. Robeson was destroyed by the American government. And it's really interesting that when we talk about the black athlete being involved politically, they weren't really involved on racial issues. It was usually issues of Nazism or communism or the other issues that engage the black athlete, and then someone like Jackie Robinson began to say, okay, well, if you're going to ask me to defend America against Nazism, as Jesse Owens did as well, now I got to ask you about police brutality and about Jim Crow and about all these other things. And so this is sort of where that heritage came from, and the athlete has felt an obligation ever since, because the argument that I make in the book is that the black athlete is the most important, the most influential black employee of the 20th century. They're the ones who made it. They're the ones who got to the education. They're the ones who got the money. They're the ones who created a lot of the movement that started integration. And people still look at them as, okay, you know, Bo, you know this, no matter where you stand, no matter how much you did, if you're Michael Jordan, if you're Tiger Woods, people are still going to look at you and go, what did you do? Did you help or were you not helping? And no matter how great Michael Jordan is, people still look at him and say, well, LeBron's doing more in the community than Michael ever did.
Yeah, and I'm always, I don't know if torn is the right way to put that, but it's always an interesting thing because I protect people's right to be as selfish as they want to be, right? Like if you decide this ain't for you, because also for some people it is really not for them and you don't necessarily want them coming and hanging around. But what you say is interesting about the notion of being the most powerful employees, because sports is a weird place where the employees make enough money to be listened to, at least in theory. That's right. And that's where the Colin Kaepernick situation got weird, is normally having money will get people to listen to you. And then he was reminded that he was, in fact, simply an employee.
That's right. That is the special place of the black athlete. With everybody else, if you've got money, and that includes Oprah, black woman. People talking, Oprah says something, people listen. People are suddenly talking about her running for president, even though she shot that down. But with the black athlete, it's like shut up and play. You're messing with our entertainment. And that goes back to this notion of who do they belong to, is that I think that what you have is that the players are the ones who are driving the industry, and they're the ones with the talent. But the fan, the season ticket holder, and the media and the coaching and the entire industry of sports is predominantly white. So you have this battle between these black employees who are incredibly well paid and the fact that the public tends to treat them as if they're being given something. There's a lack of professional respect that you have for the black athlete. So when they talk, it's like, oh, you're making all that money. Why don't you just shut up and play? And it just doesn't work that way. And LeBron James is one of the guys in this, in this resurrection of the heritage who is sort of saying, no, I'm not going to follow the Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, OJ thing. I'm tying myself to Robinson and to Ali and to Bill Russell, and if I have something to say, I'm going to say it. People aren't used to that.
Well, I also kind of feel like that thought process is a vestige of sorts of a time before integration, right? Because if you existed in a space where you had a recollection of segregation, then someone can sell to you the idea that you have been, quote unquote, allowed to play because there was a time where you could not play, and now you are going to. And so I wonder how much of a generational effect you have with the fact that, we're dealing with athletes now who not only have no recollection of segregation, like I obviously have no recollection of segregation, but I was born in 1980. 1965 is not that long before that.
That's right. You have institutional memory.
Right. But World War II seem like something from a completely different era of time. For these guys, segregation has to feel that same way. Like they have no recollection of why they should simply be appreciative.
Well, exactly right. But I think what's interesting about that is that for the player, sure. I mean, if you're born in we're dealing with athletes. What's funny is how quickly time is moving. We're dealing with professional athletes now who were born in the 90s. So if you're born in the 90s, to you the civil rights movement is just grainy footage from the history books. And so, yet the attitudes still hold. The attitude, and I think it's also, when we talk about professional respect, it comes back to this entire notion that if you use your body to earn money, it's somehow not as valuable as if you're using your brain. And so we don't get angry when the billionaire team owner is making far more than the millionaire employee, but the millionaire employee is supposed to feel grateful. Also, something else along those lines, too, is that generationally speaking today, we have virtually no appreciation of labor the way we did if you were of a previous generation, where there was at least some semblance of balance between labor and management. Now we take the argument that management can do whatever it wants, and therefore, even if you are $31 million a year LeBron James, you're still just an employee, and we don't need to hear from you, which is complete nonsense, but it is how people feel.
Yeah, well, sports and labor is always interesting because baseball, and I've always, exactly what the role of the 94 strike is and what the popularity of baseball has been after that. But baseball was always interesting because the players would win every single time, and even that union has had the teeth taken out of it.
That's exactly right. That's one of the things that this book is about. I mean, it really is. It's the combination. You're talking about where are we? Who are we today as people? What do we want these athletes? We say that we want them to talk when they didn't talk. Remember? Well, he doesn't say anything, and how come he's not being more? He just counts his money. He's not. You're supposed to be a role model. How come you're not saying anything? Then they talk, and we tell them to shut up and play. And then you start looking at where we are as a culture and how things are shifting, and this feeling of nationalism and authoritarianism and all of these different concepts. And it's all happening in sports right now. I think one of the things that I enjoyed very much about writing this book was talking to the veterans themselves who are saying, look, we have problems at the VA. We need jobs. We don't like being made to feel like props so you can sell more camo jerseys. Everybody sort of has a stake in this about what we're selling. And you're right. I think that, I remember having this conversation in the book with the fantastic 3-star general, Russell Honoré. And I said, General, we were talking about the paid patriotism, the fact that the teams were charging the military to sing God Bless America and to do all these homecomings, that they're not organic. They're actually staged. They're a deception. They're fake. And I said to the general, General, with all due respect, maybe when I take my 12-year-old to the game, I don't want him to be recruited by the military. I just want him to be a kid and to enjoy baseball or to enjoy football. And he said, well, that's too bad because we got to man the force. This is where we're looking for that warrior athlete who's going to join the force. This is where we recruit. And maybe, just maybe, some kid is going to come to a Patriots game and, see the military on the field and see the F-14 fly over and want to join. And so it makes you wonder, on the one hand, is there such thing as a harmless deception or a positive deception? Or is there something more like the veterans say, which is, look, if it's organic, then make it be organic. Don't make money off of us. We have problems of our own.
Now, let me ask you this with the notion of the heritage in the book, because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but that implies a certain lineage that is being carried on through and has been picked up with more fervor in the last 4 or 5 years. But for the period of between the late 60s and, say, the mid-2000s or somewhere in there, what is your analysis of the participation politically of black athletes in that space?
Non-existent. And I think, and in the book, I certainly talk about this. It's O.J., Michael, and Tiger. And on the one hand, can you blame them? On the one hand, you say, okay, that O.J. Simpson was the first athlete to really be marketed to white audiences. 1975, you've got free agency in baseball, so all of a sudden the money explodes. The players aren't going to public schools anymore. They're not like us anymore. By 1979, Nolan Ryan is the first guy making $1 million a year. By 81, Winfield gets a $22 million contract. So all of a sudden, they're in the super rich category. They're gone. And also, I think coming out of Vietnam and coming out of Watergate and all of that as well, the country was kind of weary. And I don't think people viewed race the same way as we go into the conservative 1980s. And I think you looked at it and said, okay, we don't have Jim Crow anymore. There's no reason to be in the streets. And so then by the mid-1980s, the Michael Jordan Nike phenomenon overtook everything. And I asked Al Sharpton about this because he was in the middle of it during the Central Park Five and all that racial stuff that was going on in the 1980s. And I said, Reverend, think about LeBron James and think about the black players getting involved right now with I Can't Breathe and everything else. Did anybody step up when you had your time in the 1980s? And he said, not a one. He said, not a single black athlete supported us when we were going through everything that we went through in the 80s. He said the entertainers did. He said Prince would call and say, hey, don't put my name on it, but, here's $20,000, I got you back. Michael Jackson would step in. Here's $15,000. James Brown would step in. I said, but during the 1980s, you had Dave Winfield and Lawrence Taylor and all these great players, Patrick Ewing in New York. He says, not a single one of them supported us. Not a single one spoke up at all. And then I said to the Reverend, Rev, maybe Michael Jordan had it right. Maybe he recognized better than everybody that we're 13% of the population. You're not going to get the seat at the table that you think you're going to get. And maybe in this country and in this culture, money is the best thing we're going to get, so you might as well get as much as you can. And Sharpton said, yep, all those things are true, but that still makes you a coward.
That's a hell of a dismount there, Howard.
And I'm sitting there going, okay, is he wrong? But it goes back to what you were saying, giving someone the right to be as selfish as they want. That's the heritage. That's what we're talking about, that if you are part of this, can you be as selfish as you want? Are you able to step away? Are you able to say, no, this isn't for me? Because we know we put this on, once again, the ones who made it. If you're the athlete, you're the one who got to go to college. You're the one who gets the free education, supposedly, even though you work for it. You're the one who's got the $20 million. You're the one the kids look up to. All of that stuff combined. Can you step away from this responsibility? And that's one of the points that I try to make in the book, is to say, I'm looking forward to the day when we got enough doctors and lawyers and presidents and senators where we don't need the athlete to do that anymore. But I don't think we're at that point, and the player still has that responsibility.
And it winds up, I think that gets you to an idea that is in line with what something Bill Rhoden had written in the $40 Million Slaves, though, where it gets tricky is that so much is done at this point. No one is the money comes so strong and so early now for athletes that cultivating an educated athlete is not the incentive that it was for people before. Because when playing ball was a regular job, then you absolutely need to have that degree because somehow you're going to have to work after all of this is done. Now people are in on the big score so early where what I think is most interesting about LeBron is the fact that he seems to be sophisticated and aware enough to know what the issues are to capably discuss them, which I don't think we can assume of everyone.
No, you can't. Not only that, but you should probably assume that most people are probably not as informed as their celebrity gives them platform. And you're right. And I think that the big question here is it always comes back down to black body over black brain. And are we going to get to a point where black brain actually wins? And that's why when you say, okay, well, where are the white athletes? Well, the white athletes, they don't need the athlete in white American culture because they've got white brain everywhere. You don't need Aaron Rodgers to step out on these issues. We need Michael Jordan. We needed LeBron James because of that disparity. And I think that the other question, too, when we talk about activism and patriotism and all of these different conflicts in here, let's also not forget, do you gain entry into the heritage by wearing a T-shirt? That's all it takes now? Is that it? Just by wearing a T-shirt, suddenly you are in the same pantheon as Jackie Robinson or Bill Russell? I mean, those guys risked and lost a lot of things. And so I always worry about this from a corporate standpoint as well, which is what are we actually really doing? And once again, all of these different conflicts, when they come together, it brings me back to one thing, Bo, which is sports was supposed to be the place where we weren't supposed to be having this conversation, but sports is the place where we're having it the most, and we're having it the most vocally. And that is a major difference. And to me, it goes back to these two things, post 9/11 sports colliding with the post-Ferguson black athlete.
And it also comes with an interesting quirk of our heavily segregated America, which is this is the place for a lot of white people, the one where they can't ignore the black people.
That's the one spot where they can't.
Yeah, because let's be real about this. There's never been any level of integration really in the United States aside from like Supreme Court mandated stuff that was not done really ultimately for the greater good, right? Like we can't do insert thing here without these people. So I guess we're going to get enough to where we can do it. And then it just gets to a place where the forces of competition drive the numbers up higher and higher and higher. But there's never been like a level of integration just for the hell of doing it. It is because people believe that those jobs are jobs that only black people can do.
That's right, or simply forced, and then over the course of the next several years, as we've seen with Brown versus Board of Education and the battle over voting rights right now, extra legally or internally being taken away. All those victories are being reduced and diminished over time. It's really something that I felt was hitting at a point right now where it was like, okay, you can't avoid this anymore, and especially the revival of the player. I think, to me, that's why LeBron is so important. Everything that we're talking about how money disincentivizes people to be active, to be social, to be citizens. He's the antithesis of all of this. He's probably the only guy I can think of since maybe Ali in the mid-'70s who was the peak athlete in the United States, the peak black athlete in the United States, who put his name on this. That's special to me.
I still, because I don't know the background fully, but the fact that happened with LeBron, like, so you think about it with Ali, where Ali had to be the one to take the blows in public, certainly, but Ali was a follower in some ways, and what he was following was the Nation of Islam. LeBron, if he was going to follow anybody, the people who have been in his ear the most over the last 20 years has been Nike. That is not the Nation of Islam. You know what I mean?
It's far from the Nation of Islam. You know what's funny is that there's a section in the book where we talk about power. And once again, what does revolution look like? And I had a conversation with Carmelo Anthony for a story that ran in ESPN the magazine last October, a couple of Octobers ago, all about this sort of story, all about what takes place here. And he was talking about Donald Sterling, and he was talking about the players deciding to play or not to play. And he's like, well, if I had been in the playoffs, that was our moment. That was our moment to not play. I would not have played. They negotiated. They decided to trust Adam Silver. They got the negotiation. I talked to Charles Barkley about this. His position was the players handled this perfectly. They went right to the line to let a new commissioner know they weren't playing, that they were serious, and they got the change they were looking for. And Carmelo was like, no, that's not enough, because at the end of the day, it's still their game, and they think that we need them more than they need us, when actually we don't, which I thought was a fascinating, revolutionary thing to say. But then I also said to him, do you ever foresee a moment when the players really do decide to check their power or to test their power? And I think that's what LeBron is. I think when you look at LeBron James, I honestly believe his end game is full, complete player control. That one day the players do have a say in who is the commissioner. One day players do have pieces of ownership. And when you watch him, he's such a singular force. And he's doing all of it while he's at the height of his athletic power, so you can't ignore him. It's not like he can't play anymore. He's in your face. And he's being political at the same time. I don't know where that motivation or where that sort of influence came from, but it's pretty powerful. And I really think that he's sort of this guy that over the next 10, 12 years or so, he's going to be responsible for some serious change in sports when you start adding up all of these different themes combined with the fact that players are now starting to reach a point in terms of net worth where if they did decide to combine some of their money, things could be different.
He's strategic, though, because one thing I'll note, and I'm not knocking him for it because I can understand the strategy, but it is worth noting, he wore that I Can't Breathe shirt in Brooklyn. It wasn't no Tamir Rice shirts in Cleveland.
And there's no question about that. And that's the other thing, too, about, that's why the end of the book is referred to as the peacemakers. Paul Robeson, Jackie Robinson, Bill Russell, they were very clear and unequivocal that they were advocates for black people. The new generation, the LeBron Jameses of the world and the Dwayne Wades and the Chris Pauls and the rest of them, they make so much money. They are being asked to be advocates for everybody. We all get along? We got to all get together on this. They're asked to be the bridge. And that's why people can't stand Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick is not a peacemaker. Colin Kaepernick says, no, I am here in full support of black people against state-sponsored violence against my people. Very, very different approach than what LeBron and the other guys are doing. Those guys have to straddle a corporate fence that you haven't seen, that the Bill Russells and the Colin Kaepernicks don't do.
That is Howard Bryant. Check out the book, The Heritage, Black Athletes. Boy, I hate it when I scroll down too fast. Black Athletes, The Divided America, and The Politics of Patriotism. You can find it at Amazon and all the other places fine books are sold. My man, thank you. I appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Thank you. This is great.
No problem, man. Howard Bryant with the big old earring. So we go from bald-headed Bomani and bald-headed Howard to telling you guys that 66% of men lose their hair by age 35. Once you notice, it's too late. So it's easy to keep the hair you've got, then replace the hair you've lost, especially if that hairline is slowly creeping backwards. How you going to feel a year from now if it's business as usual up there? So I ask you, do you want a bald spot to pop up or do you want to do something about it? Don't turn to weird solutions. Don't just cross your fingers. For Hims.com. One-stop shop for hair loss, skincare, and other wellness supplements. Hims connects you to real doctors and medical grade solutions to treat hair loss. Use well-known generic equivalents to name brand prescriptions that'll help you keep your hair. There's no waiting room. There's no awkward visits. So save hours by going to forhims.com. Answer a few quick questions. The doctor will review and prescribe you products that come to your door. My listeners will get a trial month of For Hims for just $5 today right now while supplies last. See website for full details. That would cost you hundreds if you went to the doctor or the pharmacy. Go to forhims.com/Bomani. That's FORHIMS.com/Bomani. Forhims.com/Bomani. All right. We are now to the part of the NBA playoffs where we only have one game per night. It's a blessing and curse, right? Like, you love having all that basketball, but man, I'm tired. I know you're tired. We all tired. But we basically got the conference finals, I think, that if we had to guess, we thought we would have received, right? We got the Celtics and the Cavaliers. We have got the Warriors and the Rockets. I feel like either way it goes, we got an NBA finals that people are going to be excited about seeing. Like, yay, NBA. There you go. That is a win. Let's start here in the West. The Rockets closed out Utah in 5. Utah got that one win, and then the Rockets were like, all right, enough of the madness, guys. Enough of that. You guys are a good, scrappy. Way to go. Way to go. No. We got this. And so Chris Paul, who was lights out in game 5 to close that out, gets to the conference finals for the first time in his career. I mean, long or short, man, he's the Dominique Wilkins of his generation. Like, Dominique Wilkins was the guy from the 1980s who did not make it to the conference finals. Played in the same era as all those other dudes. Not everybody was going to be able to make it. And Dominique Wilkins played for the Hawks. And you can't expect but such a level of success that you're going to get from playing for the Hawks. Chris Paul played for the now Pelicans, then Hornets, and played for the Clippers. Like, I think we give LeBron bonus points for winning a championship in Cleveland, right? For obvious reasons, because Cleveland, champion, all that stuff. Dude, Chris Paul played for the Clippers. Like, have we already forgotten what that meant? Like, what it was to play for the Clippers before Chris Paul got there? They had Blake Griffin, so you got a little bit excited about it. But, hey, man, Chris Paul legitimized that franchise in a crazy way, only to have people call him a choker because his teams didn't make it through in the postseason while he played pretty well in the postseason. Like, I see why people say that about James Harden, because we've seen James Harden have some awful games in elimination situation. I believe multiple games with double-digit turnovers. I see why you think that James Harden chokes under those circumstances. Dude, Chris Paul's just really, really, really good and had been on teams that couldn't get it done. Like, the one that Chris Paul will probably be haunted by forever is they had that 3-1 lead on Houston before the Rockets came back and got him. But if you watch that Clippers team, the starting 5 the Clippers had that year with Chris Paul, Redick, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, I think Jamal Crawford might have been the other guy. But their starting 5, that was the best 5-man lineup in the NBA, plus-minus wise. They were the best. What happened was they went to the bench. Because remember, they had that big lead in Game 6. And then they just ran out of gas. And then Game 7 came around and you just looked at it. They were gassed. It wasn't a matter of Chris Paul choking or him just not having the right stuff. His teams just didn't win.
Ran into a hot Josh Smith.
Oh, there is that. There is that.
Very hot. Piping hot.
But the thing I do wonder, though, with Chris Paul always is, at his height, could you control the ball as much as he controlled the ball, right? As being in the neighborhood of 6 foot flat, could you do that? That's not the problem that it was before, because now they got James Harden. And you can do this at James Harden's size and get it done. And the way they play is interesting, because I don't feel like Chris Paul and James Harden really play off of each other. It's like sometimes you do it, okay, sometimes you do it, but not in the way that like LeBron and Dwayne Wade did it, because when they did it, they were just absolutely looking to score. Chris Paul's looking to get the ball to other people, and James Harden is a much better playmaker than I think most people give him credit for being. And all that's happened, and they get to play the Warriors. Yeah. They get to play the Warriors. Draymond basically has just been like, yeah, you wanted us, you got us. Because what Daryl Morey talked about earlier this year, how they were focused on playing the Warriors. They figured they had to get everything done to play the Warriors. And the beauty of being the Warriors is you ain't got to really focus on anything but being the Warriors. I mean, that's where they are. That's the way that they played it. And now, I said coming into this that I thought that Houston would beat Golden State. I don't know. I don't think I would say that Houston has looked great this postseason. I would say the Warriors have had moments where they look great, and obviously the Rockets had too. But I don't feel like either of them has looked like a team that nobody can beat. So maybe the Warriors made their change to the new death lineup, what is the Hamptons, the Hamptons lineup. That's what they're calling that. The most bourgeois thing you can call your basketball team, with the Hamptons lineup. We had seen at different points, Luke Mbah-a-Moute was injured earlier with the shoulder problem. PJ Tucker had a point where I thought he was going to be hurt. They're both going to play. That matters, man, because these dudes can play some D. Like, they've got, okay, I'll say a couple of guys you can run at Kevin Durant. Like, you can run PJ Tucker at Durant. But, I mean, I'm not saying that PJ Tucker can, like, not guard Durant. Like, that would be a bit hyperbolic. But you need guys you can run at him. And they got dudes that they can run at him. Mbah-a-Moute, you can run at him. Trevor Reeves is still in the league. He still play for them?
Yes, he does.
Yeah. Yo, ain't he been in the league like 15 years?
Been in the league a long time.
He's sneaky
and a
old.
Serviceable role player.
He's
a great role player.
NBA champion.
Indeed.
Yeah, but you throw him at him. Like, I expect him to go down there and break down in the stands. He might not be able to get back up at his age, but you throw him at him. The question for me with Curry is, I mean, Chris Paul's a good defensive player, but there's but so much energy you can ask him to expend picking up Steph Curry 40 feet, from the basket because he can shoot so well. How is Curry's knee really? Because they're getting some days to rest, and that's cool, but we'd be greatly overestimating what a day is. Like, oh yeah, they got 2 days in between games. The only reason that 2 days in between games is really a proper recharge for play games because it's better than one. I mean, that's all. That's all it is. Like, Gabe, you think after you play the NBA game that you'd be like, cool, we can do this again in a couple of days?
And to your point, it's not a couple of days. It's like, hey, can you do that in 24 hours?
Yes.
So it's really like an afternoon nap.
Yes, on a plane.
Yeah, on a plane, right? And then get it together because you're going back out there.
Yeah. Put some cold water on your face, smack yourself up a little bit, then go back out there.
Yeah, it's like going to bed knowing that you have to wake up at 3:00 in the morning to get to the airport or something like that.
Yes.
And it's like, am I going to be just as tired if I don't sleep at all?
Yes.
Or as if I go and try to get a couple hours of sleep? Because I'm still going to be tired.
That's exactly
You're still going to be hurting.
That's a great comparison. Now, let me ask you this about the Rockets, and this is where it gets interesting. Can the Rockets keep Capella on the court? Because if they can keep him on the court, he swings things a lot. I don't know if he got a lot better than he had been when I watched him more regularly, but he's looked so good in this postseason. He gave the work to Rudy Gobert, right? If they can keep him on the floor with his rim protection, if nothing else, just for the rim protection, if they can keep him on the floor, they got a chance. But how much can they afford to play him? Like, I think, so for example, their lineups with Capella on the floor might be better than the Warriors lineups with JaVale McGee on the floor, or Bell, or whoever else they decide to try it out there to masquerade as a center. Zaza still play for them?
Yes, he does.
Yeah, he's still there. I ain't seen him out there in a while. But their lineups with Capella are better. So the Warriors, I think, are going to have to go small, but the Warriors can't go small but for so long. Like, that was the thing about, when they were running that death lineup out there that year in the postseason, their plus minus, I remember, for long stretches of the postseason with all those other lineups is right around 0, where they were really making their hay against people was when they went to that small lineup. But they can't do it forever. Obviously, they would have.
Yeah, there's a reason why they did it only at the end of games rather than starting it out right now.
In spurts. Like, there's a reason that they played it that way. So how long can the Rockets manage to keep Capella out there, or when the Warriors can't afford to go small in that way, what kind of hay can they make while he's out there? That, I think, will probably be the nuts and bolts basketball question that this will come down to. Now, my question is, with the NBA Finals close enough that Chris Paul can smell them, he can taste them, does this put us on red alert of him hitting somebody in the testicles? Because I feel like with all the chances to get to for a chance to achieve a dream, he'll do anything. And we know that his do anything involves hitting people in the testicles.
Yeah, my question was going to be, how dirty of a Chris Paul are we going to see?
Yeah. So I feel like the height of it is Chris Paul, Julius Hodge, 2005, when he walked behind him and hit him in the testicles in a game at the RBC Center. I feel like that's the height of Chris Paul dirty, but all the stops are coming out. Like, don't let them mess around and get down like 3-1. They get down 3-1.
They lose home court, and it's on.
Yes. That's right. They do have home court.
They do.
You almost forget about that. They do have home court. I do feel like, though, I don't know if the Rockets are going to be the one, but we're just at a point now of transition at the top of these conferences, man. Like, the Cavs are probably not going to be the top team in the East next year, and they've been, there's the Warriors have had it for the stretch of time. We're seeing the Celtics. And we're seeing the Sixers and the rise that they're making over there in the East. I feel like Utah's in a position to rise in the West. I think that Houston can make some moves and maybe do a little rising. I mean, their primary, Chris Paul's old. James Harden is in the prime of his career. But the Warriors, this is how it goes for these great teams like this, though. They have the home court, and then one year you look up and they're the 2 seed. And then you look up the next year, and it just ain't what it was. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen here, but I think we've seen the Warriors look their best. They'll probably still look better than everybody else for a little bit, but we've seen them look their best. Eastern Conference Finals coming up. Celtics, Cavaliers. This is going to be the test of LeBron, because I feel like if we learned anything in that series against the Sixers, is that the Celtics have more talent than we give them credit for having. And I think that part of that is the way we kind of do this with confirmation bias, where we're going into it and we're like, wow, Brad Stevens is so good. And then when the team plays well, you're like, wow, look at how Brad Stevens got the most out of those number 3 overall picks in the draft. Like Jaylen Brown. Like, wow, he's really getting the most out of that guy that the Celtics refused to trade in order to get Kyrie Irving. I mean, I say that to say that it appeared that maybe the Celtics thought that they had a higher level of talent. Now, I know for fact, look at me doing a little reporting, I know for fact Celtics front office did not view this as a team that would be ready to win a championship this year. If that happens, that is exceeding expectations, and some measure of credit of that goes to Brad Stevens. But, dude, Horford is really good. Let me ask you this question about Al Horford. Last show we had, we were talking, I was saying I think Al Horford is a better player right now than Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons. Do you think Al Horford is a better player than Kevin Love? Like, I feel like that's one that people might not have thought of, but I feel like Al Horford is a better player than Kevin Love. Kevin Love's been playing well recently, but I feel like Al Horford is a better player than Kevin Love.
The situations that they're both in says a lot about their production right now, does it not?
Yes. They're doing some good things to get Kevin Love shots, but Kevin Love is like that other guy. Everything in Boston right now is really running through Al Horford. The offense runs through Al Horford. The defense runs through Al Horford. He doesn't take that many shots necessarily, but Embiid checks Al Horford and Al Horford needs a shot. Al Horford got a shot. Al Horford guarding Ben Simmons, because Ben Simmons, no, it's a shutdown. Like, he's that guy. But I bring it up to say, if Al Horford is a better player than Kevin Love, then think about what we're saying here about the overall quality of the roster that the Cavs have. It's like, Cavs have LeBron. Let's say it goes LeBron, Al Horford, Kevin Love in terms of the best players in the series. Now, where does it go after that? Right? We're going Jason Tatum. Although right now, who am I to say that Kevin Love at this very moment is better than Jason Tatum? We go Jason Tatum. Marcus Smart compared to them other cats on the Cavs. As much as I hate watching Marcus Smart play basketball, Marcus Smart is a really good basketball. Jaylen Brown. Would Jaylen Brown be the second or third best player on the Cavaliers? I do believe he would. So Boston, who I've long said is a collection of low spades, it is they a handful of low spades. I feel like Al Horford is kind of like Jack or Queen of Spades, but you know, if you throw down the Queen of Spades, you're going to win a book. Like, somebody going to have to beat you, somebody going to get that book from you on the Queen of Spades. They probably got to play a deuce or a joker. They probably got to go hard in order to get that from you. He is a hollow spade. Jason Tatum, I feel like it's kind of like a 10 of spades. If there was a possibility that 10 of spades, you look down, you look up, and it might turn into a king of spades. Jaylen Brown's kind of in a similar situation, right? But at least they spades. LeBron over there with a handful of clubs. I mean, it's there. So, like, for the Cavaliers to win this series, what exactly is it going to take for LeBron? Because one thing I do think that's interesting is that Toronto had all those long guys to throw at LeBron, right? Siakam and all those cats. Like, they're trying to, and then LeBron just faded away on all of them, and then there was nothing they could do. Gabe, who's Celtics got to throw at LeBron?
Jaylen Brown.
Jaylen Brown and Al Horford?
Can Al Horford move like that?
I mean, Marcus Smart's going to do some of it, but I feel like Marcus Smart's best chance to guard LeBron is to try to tickle him.
Does beating the Celtics do anything for LeBron?
No. Losing to them is not good. Winning? Nah. This is what he does. It means 8 straight time that they've gone to the conference finals. Like, there's no more conference final winning that is going to move the needle. I think it would be wild impressive, but think about it like this. The last season that Magic Johnson played before he retired the first time, he dragged those 91 Lakers to the finals. It was magic and magic and magic and magic and magic. That was about it. Like, as an old James Worthy, I mean, he was not a healthy James Worthy at that point. He dragged them to the finals. When we go recount Magic Johnson's career, not a lot of people are like, but hey, don't you forget that time that Magic dragged him to the finals in 1991. Nobody's doing that. But the difference is, also when we talk about Magic, nobody talks about, well, don't forget that time in 1990 where in the conference semifinals, the Lakers lost to the Phoenix Suns led by Mark West in 5 games. With LeBron, we remember that stuff. We remember every series that LeBron has lost. So, yeah, all these guys is to lose, but he knows that. Like, that's part of why when people are like, well, LeBron only goes places where he thinks he can win. Because no one is asked to win in the way that LeBron is asked to win. And if he gets this team to the finals, this is, I wouldn't say is as impressive as 2007 because Kevin Love is still better than anybody that the 2007 team had, but this is up there. This would be way up there. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us here on The Right Time. We do this thing here twice a week. Thanks to Howard Bryant, the author of The Heritage, Black Athletes, A Divided America, and The Politics of Patriotism. Check his book out at Amazon, everywhere else. The books are sold. My man Gabe Bassain handles everything behind the scenes. Thank you, sir. We will be back next week. Don't forget, rate and review us at the iTunes store. We like 5 stars. Y'all got 5 stars. Don't cost you nothing. Give us 5 stars. And, of course, thanks to 4 Hymns. Take it easy.
Thanks for checking out The Right Time with Bomani Jones podcast.
You can listen or subscribe on the ESPN app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
The Right Time
with Bomani Jones.